Welcome back to the Science and Art of Open Water Swimming, and today's episode is a special one. If you've ever swum in Lake Argyle, you'll know there's nothing quite like it. The sheer scale of the water, the red Kimberley cliffs, the freshwater clarity, and that mix of calm and chaos that the wind can throw at you. I completed the event in 2022 as a duo with my son Tyson, and it remains one of the most memorable swims of my life. Joining me today is the man who has helped shape this event into what it is. Glenn Taylor is the event manager of the first national Kimberley Lake Argyle Swim, but he's also a serious endurance athlete in his own right. He's completed 9 Ironman triathlons, including the World Championships in Hawaii, and has represented New Zealand as an elite athlete in the 1999 World Championships. So, Glenn brings a couple of perspectives: the athlete's mindset and the organiser's eye for detail. We're going to dive into the history of the event, the unique environment, how safety and crocodile management work behind the scenes, and while Lake Argyle has become such a bucket list swim for athletes across Australia and beyond. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Grant. Thanks for the introduction, and it's great to be with you.
So, before we talk about the swim itself, I'd really like to start with getting to know you as the outdoor adventurer, the endurance athlete, having completed 9 Ironmans as well, so including Hawaii, and competing at the elite level in the world champs in '99. How'd you get into endurance sport initially, and what kept you in it for such a long time?
Yeah, look, I was very lucky growing up. Had some great parents who got us swimming from a young age, cycled with us. I remember doing fun runs from a very young age with my father, and we did all sports, and that just gave you the base for obviously triathlon and for everything in life. I was lucky enough to go and work in New Zealand for a while, and that's where I really got into my triathlon seriously. And I'm fortunate that, Ironman and longer distance is something you can do as an slightly older athlete. So I was lucky. I think I was probably about 29 years of age when I was at my athletic sort of peak, which is lucky I chose endurance sport. And I just loved it. Yeah, just loved the training and loved going to those events.
When you think about your own experience as that endurance athlete, how does that background influence how you might manage an event like Lake Argyle?
Yeah, so as well as doing those big iconic events, I did a lot of smaller events, Olympic distance and halves, and built up to Ironman. How I think you should do. I see a lot of people race straight to the very top of endurance, and they miss all those building blocks plus the experience of local level, club level events before you're on the big stage. And so, what I bring to the Lake Argyle Swim is obviously very, very much a lot of competitor view of an event, how a competitor experiences it. Plus, my partner. I guess the trick of doing 9 Ironmans isn't finishing 9 Ironmans; it's staying happily married while you're doing 9 Ironmans. And my lovely wife has been to all those events as well, so that's how I guess I learned to include the spectators and supporters and families, and yeah, provide that whole wraparound experience from a competitors and families view. So that's definitely what I gained as an athlete. What I'm bringing to Lake Argyle Swim.
For listeners who haven't seen Lake Argyle up close, how do you describe the swim and the place itself?
Lake Argyle is absolutely spectacular. If you can picture 27-degree fresh water on a lake that's 50 kilometres long by 30 kilometres wide, and a sister jewel in the crown of the Kimberley environmentally. The whole reason I'm actually in Kununurra is that in 2007, my wife and I cycled around Australia looking for somewhere to live. 2007 was a massive drought through most of Australia, and we cycled into Kununurra, and there's this giant lake with that much fresh water flowing down the Ord River. And we fell in love with the water and fell in love with Kununurra because of the water. So that's how spectacular Lake Argyle is for me.
As you say, it's this massive body of water, and it's just amazing the scenery around it with those massive red rocks. It is awesome. So, if we go back to the beginning of the event, from my understanding, it started with a very small group in about 2006. How did that then evolve into what we know it is today?
Yeah, well, 2006 was just before I arrived in town, but it took visitors to sort of highlight to locals how spectacular a swimming venue Lake Argyle was. A small group of athletes from the Balmoral Swimming Club led by Kieran Kelly, decided they'd do a bit of a fundraiser for Royal Flying Doctors, and they swum the length of the lake. Legend has it they were worried about crocodiles, so they started at the cage, where I think the cage lasted about 5 minutes, and then they were swimming freely without it. But that really opened the eyes to locals that, wow, this is the world class venue to come and have a swim in. And it started from there, really. The idea, it had a few stops and starts, and different people got involved. And eventually, the Lake Argyle Committee was formed in about 2010. I was lucky enough to swim it myself in 2011. And then I've managed it ever since I had a swim.
So when that committee was formed, that obviously was probably quite a large turning point for the event. Every year it sells out almost instantly. I think in the last few years it sold out in less than 5 minutes. What do you think really drives that level of demand?
Yeah. So first of all, I tell everyone it took 10 years to be an overnight success. So back in 2011, I think there was 100 people involved. We've still got a couple of those original committee members, and one of the committee members remembers just doing a barbecue for all the competitors back in the day. It's certainly grown a lot bigger than it now, and there's no single one committee member on a barbecue making it happen anymore. Look, we could take a lot of credit for the event, and we do. It is a very special event what we offer and how we do the dinner and make the most of it. But undoubtedly, it's the 27-degree fresh water in the Kimberley that makes it so special. We recognise how far people are coming, how hard it is to get to the East Kimberley. So we do, incorporate the dinner and make sure it's a good wraparound package. But I think the lake is absolutely spectacular and a key part of why our event sells out.
And for you, looking at participation and the growth that's huge over the last 10 years, what's been the most surprising or most rewarding thing about that for you?
Look, the fact that everyone keeps coming back, so we have a lot of regulars now, and like I said, it really hits home because it is not an easy place to get to. The Kimberley is a long way from most of the rest of Australia. Logistically, it's hard to get here as well. So that's amazing when people go to such effort to try to get here and come such a long way and become regular participants. That's just absolutely incredible. We don't want anyone to miss out. We really want people to miss out. We've got a couple of logistical challenges, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But our remoteness and access to the lake, yeah, pushes us to the limit every year. We are absolutely determined to sustainably grow the event, not just just get it out of control and wreck the experience for everyone. It's about ensuring that high experience. Now, feedback surveys every year are remarkable.
We'll touch on some of that other stuff later, but right now, one of the things which allows people from interstate or from further away to travel and compete is the 10K event where you're providing the kayaks and really you just need to bring the swimmer and the paddler and then everything else is catered for. I think that really does allow participation in the whole event.
Look, absolutely. As an athlete that has carted bikes around the world and tried to move equipment around the world, it's a big push to get a kayak. So that was one of the initiatives that probably came from my background as a athlete, and it doesn't make it easier to have 40 kayaks in storage and the logistics to getting them to the 10K start line and getting the people there as well. Again, pushes us, but clearly we recognise the ability to fly in with a mate and experience it was something that we're very proud of being able to provide. Yeah, so 40 10K solos get that option.
So if we talk about the course design and the logistics around it, the course currently is a deep water start, starting in the heart of the lake. That's quite unique. So what is the reasoning going out 20 Ks and starting out there?
Yeah, two really good reasons. One's the romantic one of why would you come all the way to Lake Argyle and not feel like you're in the middle of a 50-kilometre by 30-kilometre lake? So again, that's part of giving our competitors that experience. If we just stayed in one small bay, which you can see from the dinner venue, you're looking at like 2% of the lake. And it's massive, and you think you're looking at Lake Argyle, and you're looking at 2%. So we've got to get our competitors out there. Yes, it creates logistical challenges for us, but you wouldn't come all this way and not be in the heart of Lake Argyle. The other very sensible reason is if we ever do get a prevailing wind, it's going to be a tailwind. So the course is strategically designed that it'll be most favourable to our swimmers if ever we had a wind event, which fortunately we've been pretty much avoiding so far and hopefully continue to avoid.
Speaking of that, that's when you look at the logistics and the challenges around the event itself, if the conditions were not ideal, you have in place contingency plans to ensure the swim still continues.
Yeah, absolutely. Fortunately, we've never had to use our two alternate courses, but we do have them in place just so, again, people have come so far. We recognize how far they've come. They're not going to go home without a swim. So if it's too rough in the open lake, we've got a 5 kilometre protected course, which allows all the support boats from the same sort of format. If it was cyclonic conditions and conditions that we just would not expect in May, we can bring it down to a 1K loop and have exit every lap, and everyone can still get their 10 or 20 Ks in. But obviously, at a 1K loop, that pulls out all the boats and motors out the way, and we just have a yeah, very contained swim. But like I said, never use them, never hope to use them, but it's all part of good risk management planning.
This year, you've added the trio format for the 20Ks. Why have we introduced that category?
Just feedback from swimmers, and in particular, one of our committee members who wants to find that balance between getting on board the boat, getting refueled, but still having a social team. And so, rather than tagging out with a 4-person team where they felt the rest might have been too long, or having just go in a 2-person team where you never actually have a conversation with your fellow swimmer, they come up with a trio category. I've entertained them by adding a new category, adds logistics, adds new coloured caps, adds prizes. But
Yeah.
I've entertained them, and we're going to give it a crack. And that category has sold out like all the other categories. So good luck to those 20-kilometre trios.
And for first timers or supporters listening, what makes a great support crew at Lake Argyle?
I look all both your skipper on the boat and your paddler in the kayak are very important. Your kayak is most important to keep you in a straight line. So, sighting, we're talking 20K or 10K open water swim. We provide really good marking cards and buoys. But of course, staying on a straight line when you're swimming is difficult. So your paddler's there pretty much to keep you straight. You don't want to swim 12Ks if you've entered 10K. That's the rule. And they're there for obviously for your safety and provide you hydration and food throughout the event. So, got to trust your kayaker and be really, really good if they trained with their kayaker. A lot of people meet their kayaker for the first time on race day, which isn't our preferred method. But yeah, if you can train with your kayaker, have a system, they're very important. Then for your teams, obviously your relay teams, twos, threes, or fours, are getting on and off your boat with your skipper. So your skipper is very important for those changeovers, and that's where you're spending some of your time eating, drinking, hydrating between your shift. As you know, may have discussed on your program before, some of those top teams are down to 1 minute changes if they're in it to win it. So your skipper on a competitive team's very, very busy in and out, in and out, in and out. I'd probably rather be a skipper on a social team where they're doing 5 or 10 minute stints. It'd be a lot more relaxing day as your skipper. But both are very important.
You mentioned risk management earlier. So this is obviously a really important part of hosting an event, and any swimmer always assumes that the swimmer's safe and has been looked after. It probably never has a true understanding of what goes on behind the scenes. So through race week, and I'm sure it happens well before that, what does it look like for you from a safety operations point of view?
Look, you're absolutely right that it happens well before race week. Yeah, look, athlete safety is paramount. I'm very fortunate to run some other events, including marathons and half marathons, and I love getting into that part of the season because I always say no one's ever drowned on a marathon. But yeah, swimming has some particular risks, and look, I'm a bit of a scientist. I'm a forest scientist by training. I look at all the data, all the risk factors, and obviously a medical incident in the water is one of our greatest risks, and that's why we do still insist that everyone has their own paddler, and we just hope they can look after the swimmer if there's a medical incident. So we look at all the risks from what the individual athletes bring to the environment. We talked about the alternate courses, and I'm sure we're going to start talking about what's in the water soon enough, Grant, because it's absolutely fascinating that there's 20,000 plus freshwater crocodiles in Lake Argyle, and that's always what the media and outsiders love to talk about. But in reality, my risks are probably medical events and other things.
Well, you've brought it up, so we will mention it now. You're right. There is megafauna in most open water events. For a lot of people who are in the ocean, the first thing they'll think about are sharks. But from your event's perspective, there are a lot of freshwater crocodiles. So that is or creates a fear or a concern for swimmers. What if you give us a bit of a background in terms of the safety aspect or how friendly they actually are?
Yeah, that's great. So let's start at the beginning because coming from Southern Australia and living in New Zealand, I first had to learn there were two species of crocodile up here. The freshwater one, which is very shy, has needle-like teeth, mainly predates on fish and frogs, and their beak is. I've since learned their beak is very fragile, and they're not a sort of rip down, tear apart a cattle beast. However, two dam walls down from Lake Argyle, so you go across the Lake Argyle dam wall and then come across the Kununurra dam wall, then you've got access to the open ocean, and I can assure you there are some very, very large saltwater crocodiles down there. And they allow the stations up here allow for one cattle beast a day being taken from the Ord River. So that's the sort of size of those monsters, and they're saltwater crocodiles. And we are not going to swim with any saltwater crocodiles. So we're two dam walls up. Lake Kununurra in between is crocodile controlled zone. So the local authorities monitor that, do any trapping. And yeah, I've become a little bit interested in crocodile behavior and what happens. And occasionally a saltwater crocodile makes it across one dam wall, normally a displaced immature male looking for new territory, normally not man eater size, but we're pretty keen to have them taken out of the lake and which they are very regularly. So there's absolutely no guarantees, particularly in a big wet season like now. Saltwater crocodiles move a long way, but we are relying on them, yeah, being found and controlled. And yeah, to date, the freshies aren't causing us problems in Lake Argyle.
So how do you then communicate that sort of risk to participants in a way that's honest but not alarmist?
Yeah, we really don't have to say much. It's not really raised by the competitors. I guess there's a bit more of a media interest than it is competitors. By the time they've chosen to enter and come swim up here, they've got a little bit of knowledge about Northern Australia. They know the difference between a freshie and a salty, and normally pretty good. Having said that, we've had locals and a good mate, Yale Bolto, who will love this story. He trained regularly in the open water out at Lake Argyle. He used to swim out to an island about 3K out, turn around and come back. And he had the experience of swimming above, probably about 2 meters above, a very large freshwater crocodile. And we still joke that those speedos are still soaking in nappy sand to these days.
Still sort of on this idea of safety, etc. What do you think is one of the things swimmers probably misunderstand most about the safety at Lake Argyle?
Look, we're very fortunate that most of them are experienced open swimmers, and it's probably not their first one. I guess the biggest thing, the biggest surprise to them is freshwater. So if they are saltwater swimmers, if they've done lots of 10K, 20K open water swims in saltwater, we always say our freshwater is our locals' advantage. So our locals only train in Lake Argyle or pool, and so they're used to the reduced buoyancy. I'm sure all your listeners are aware that saltwater is denser and has more buoyancy than freshwater. So that probably catches them out. Your times in freshwater should always be slower than saltwater in equivalent conditions. And that's about buoyancy. Technically, it probably alters your position in the water. So it's probably something you should practice. It would slightly alter your head and hip position, I'm sure, with extra buoyancy or lack of buoyancy. And the other way, which I try to bring it home to athletes, is if you know a little bit of history about shipping, the Great Lakes in North America had a disproportionate number of shipwrecks, and that's because of the frequency and period of waves in freshwater versus the same conditions in saltwater. So if anyone really wants to dive into fresh and saltwater, a lot more freshwater boating disasters than you'd think.
I guess the other part along with that is because the lake is so large, the ability to generate waves from the greater amount of space for wind to generate that surface chop compared to a lot of smaller open bodies of water.
Yeah, look, we've strategically picked May. It's the end of our wet season, certainly not our build-up season. That time of the year, we generally don't get those big conditions. But there's an interesting story. The hydro engineers surveyed the lake, and they thought they'd made an error because they found like a 1 meter difference from the south end to the north end. I didn't realize that's just the effect of wind that day. Yes, such a large lake, such a big body of water, not quite tidal, but with a bit of wind, there's still a difference at one end of the lake to the other end of the lake at different times of days and weather conditions. They thought they'd made an error. It's just yeah, it's so big, such a big body of water, it can behave a little bit like the ocean at times.
So we're almost swimming uphill then.
No, this year you'll be swimming downhill. So currently, as we do this interview, the lake is 2.3 meters over the spillway. It's something like 950 cubic meters a second going over the spillway, which is in the direction of travel for our swimmers. So, if anything, you're going to be sucked along.
Having worked with the route optimization and looking at how the currents affect the swimmers going across to Rottnest, it's something we've always sort of talked about was whether or not it could be measurable in Lake Argyle with that small amount of flow of water, because obviously it is exiting close to where the finish of the race is.
Yeah, not too close. The spillway's a fair way down from the finish. Don't worry. There's no one's getting in harm's way of being sucked down the Ord River. But no, it has a definite effect. You can't get that much water out of any plug without having some impact on the rest of the bathtub. So yeah, no, it's going to be helpful if we get the perfect wind conditions that we've had over the last few years. That current may be the difference between a record or a non-record. We're getting such good swimmers now, and everyone's getting so competitive. We're down to yeah, maybe a little bit current will be the difference now for records going forward.
I do hear there are quite a few bigger names coming to swim this year.
Yes, we're not saying too much at the moment, but yes, we got some bigger names, and of course, as the event gets more and more popular, yeah, obviously it's attracting some of the stars of the sport.
I'm just wondering your thoughts maybe on whether there's an opportunity to create a triple crown in Western Australia, and whether that something like Geo Bay, a Rotto, and a Lake Argyle could be one which would then encourage swimmers to try and do all three locations.
Yeah. I'd love to be associated with those swims. They're quality swims. We don't cancel as much as some of those others, but they're quality swims. Second and third best in the state, we say. My reluctance is because of our restriction of numbers. That I'd have 350 swimmers want to do Triple Crown just to get a swim entry. So it's the restrictiveness of it, which is initial
Oh,
hesitation.
so many swimmers say the Lake Argyle Swim is unlike any other event. What do you think creates that atmosphere?
Look, fortunately, very few people get to just leave home that morning and be part of it. Even the locals have got a 75-kilometre trip out to Lake Argyle. So, first of all, most people are on holidays, and people on holidays are generally in a good space, receptive to a good time. The lake then throws up some amazing conditions. It's warm water, so no wetsuits. It's 27 degrees, and that's a change for a lot of people. So, the lake, the rock, the atmosphere is already exciting. Then our volunteers and our sponsors do such a good job to put on an amazing event. We try to get everyone back for a sit down dinner. So, what is one of my biggest logistical challenges around the event is a sit down dinner for 750 adults. So, that's your skipper, your paddler. We don't leave anyone out. So, your paddler, your skipper, they're all part of the dinner. Some events that I've been to, it's hard to get a beer at the pub, let alone be treated as a guest. We then put on entertainment, have an MC, presentations, and fortunately, our competitors are up for a party. Sometimes more the skippers who've had a slightly easier day than our swimmers, but that party goes late to the night. And open air, we just rely on the Kimberley's climate. Dry season was normally just started. We just plan an open air event. We had no alternate plans for a rainy night. It's sort of the dry season of the Kimberley's pretty reliable, and that's what we're counting on. And so it's just a fantastic night that a lot of people haven't experienced if they haven't been up to Kununurra before.
The gala dinner is a real hallmark of the event, and a lot of people are staying at the venue as well. So it allows them to really enjoy that social element after the race. If we think into the future, there are now opportunities to do an out of event swim between May and September. I'm just wondering how that partnership came about and what makes it possible.
Yeah, so what's sort of driven that is overwhelming demand. So first of all, we would love everyone that could be here on the first Saturday in May. That's our preferred position. But we have two major challenges, and one's that dinner, a sit down dinner, and we're adamant that people come so far, and we want to include your skipper and paddler. So the dinner's one bottleneck that we can work on, but that's just a resourcing issue and space issue. We can do that. The other one, which people may not think about, is in swims down South Australia, something like the Rottnest. Everyone's got access to probably 20 plus boat ramps on that morning to be part of it, to launch your team, whatever. Lake Argyle has one dirt boat ramp. That's not the easiest back in the world. It's certainly unsurfaced. We also have a 20-meter lake variation from our driest to our wettest. And so any boat ramp has to be pretty dynamic as to how you can deal with a 20-meter height variation. So we're working hard. We're working hard at the moment with Tourism WA and the Minister for Tourism to try to give us a better boat ramp. As soon as we have better lake access, we will be able to open up the vent. We'll work hard behind the scenes and bring in mobile kitchens and make the dinner bigger. But at the moment, a single access point on a lake for an open swim is pretty unique. And it's unique to us. If we had 20 boat ramps, the swim would be bigger. So that's position A, trying to get people into the swim.
You've got staggered start times for the 10K and the 20K, which probably helps to alleviate some of the logistics getting the boats in, but still everyone is arriving close to the same time, and then it's getting all the boats out at the end of the day. Just a couple of quick ones to finish off. What do you personally love most about race day? Is there a moment that you look forward to every year?
Uh, the part of race day I look forward to is when the band starts playing, because that to me means that the presentations are done. I've looked after the MC, results have been delivered correctly, and we didn't get the results horribly wrong. And as soon as that band starts playing, I try to take a step back and just have a minute looking at the crowd. Because, like most of the competitors, I've been up since 4 o'clock that morning, and it's a massive build up for the volunteers that we have, the sponsors, all the gear, all the logistics that we do. So the part of the race that I look forward to the most is the band starting, and then I can take a little bit of time out and just survey the room and probably properly look for the first time at the smiling faces and the pleasure that all the skippers, paddlers, and swimmers have got out of the day so far, with a few more hours of partying to come.
This is a question I ask everyone. What is your favorite swim set?
Oh goodness! At the moment, Kununurra hasn't even got a pool. We're under redevelopment. But fortunately, because of the love of swimming in this town, we're getting a new 50-meter pool, an upgrade from a 25-meter pool. So I guess all my 25-meter sets are going to be out the window now. I'm going to have to think about my 50-meter minimum sets. And we're really looking forward to that pool. But because of the swim, we have such a great culture of swimming in Kununurra. I tell everyone per capita, so the number of open water swimmers in Kununurra, I always tell everyone that per capita, that would mean the Rottnest swims would have 40,000 swimmers if you were going like for like. Yeah. So look, as a back to your question about what set, the longer ones for, probably building up to 400. So 100, 200, 300, 400 and back down again, because I was always looking to build an endurance space swimming, 3.8 Ks and 9 mans. So had to be longer ones, not shorter ones.
Yep. What's your favorite spot on the course?
You won't believe this, Grant, but I don't even get on the water these days. So I guess my favorite spot's where I hang out, which is the finish line. In the early days, there used to be enough slack in the system that I'd also get to see the race, used to go out and start the 10K race and stuff like that. Nowadays, I'm glued to that finish line, all the extra logistics, the finish arches, a beach, something that listeners probably are aware of. We build a beach each year to finish on. Lake Argyle, like I said, has a 20-meter height variation. So we're building a beach each year of river sand for our competitors to not have to walk on the rocks and stub their toes. So I guess I'm probably in love with the finish line the most.
Well, they still have the challenge of climbing out of the lake at the finish, though, don't they?
Absolutely. Again, so just like our boat ramp, nothing's easy in the Kimberley, and lake access by foot is also a challenge. You wouldn't believe that people could swim 10 and 20K pretty much complaint free, but walking up a 400-meter track to the resort to come to a party, I hear all about it. So come on, swimmers, tell me a bit more about the swimming and less about the walk up the hill.
It is a unique part about it. I think it's quite awesome. You did mention before a little bit about teams and changing over very quickly, for those that are a bit more competitive. What sort of advice might you have for duos and teams? Well, and this year for trios in terms of having a successful day?
Yeah, that's a great question. So much so that we're in the process of finalising a video to give tips and tricks to all our new teams. Those that are experienced probably know what they're going to do if they're having 3 minute changeovers, 5 minute changeovers, and they alter throughout the day. And particularly if it's getting competitive at the end, they may really turn over fast just to try to break the other team. So just to plan and talk amongst yourselves, but make sure you intimately involve your skipper and your paddler. They're every much part of your team as your swimmers. And so if you're going to start changing intervals and speed it up, slow it down, yeah, just make sure you're communicating with the whole team would be my strongest advice.
And for someone listening who's never swum Lake Argyle but thinking about it, what's your message to them?
First of all, get near high speed internet when registration's open. So registration's always open on the 1st November. And I think this year we broke the internet again with a 2 minute sellout. So look, like I said, we're sustainably growing the event every year. Hopefully, your internet speed can afford to get a bit lower and lower. But yeah, just try it, just have a crack, try to be a part of it, whether you want to be part of a team or a solo. The experience is just amazing. And yeah, good luck to all those potential registrations.
And finally, is there anything that we haven't covered today that you would like to share?
Yeah, I'd probably just like to shout out to the Kununurra community. This event is really, really important for starting our tourist season. Our wet season, our businesses go into hibernation. It's very slow. We rely on a dry season to get our tourists in. And the swim being on the first Saturday each May really signifies the absolute start of our season. Most of the businesses in town start putting on their staff in preparation for the swim, and then they hold them for the rest of the season. So the first Saturday in May is very important to town, and we're very grateful for the support of town. And some of our sponsors have been with us from the very, very start. They recognise the importance of the first Saturday in May, kicking it off. Roads are sometimes open, sometimes not open, like the Gib. So yeah, the swim really sets a benchmark for the start of our season here. And thanks to all the swimmers who come along and help the Kununurra community.
And you mentioned earlier about conducting a few other events, race directing other events, etc. Where can people find out more about those events and contact you?
Yeah, look, I'm very fortunate to manage the Lake Argyle Swim, and I think everyone can find that website pretty easy. But yeah, I'm part of a few other events, including the Broome Marathon, Kununurra Half Marathon. If you Google out those events, Lake Argyle Adventure Race, you'll find them straight away. It's a very small group of events up here in the Kimberley. It's a harsh environment, harsh logistics. So that you just Google any of those events and they'll find me straight away.
Glenn, thank you very much for your time today. I do really appreciate you sharing a bit of the history of the swim, explaining some of the different challenges that swimmers would face, the changes from freshwater to saltwater, how you've really considered the challenges of actually even getting to Kununurra and how you might sort of support the swimmers and create that community event that swimmers really do want to come back to year after year.
Oh, well, thank you, Grant. I love talking about the swim. We're very passionate about it. The whole of Kununurra is. And yeah, thank you for your podcast. Let's keep growing the sport of open water swimming. And thanks for sharing your knowledge.
No worries. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to the science and art of open water swimming. If you found value in this conversation, please take a moment to follow or review the podcast. It really helps these stories reach the wider open water community. Until next time, I'll see you in the water.